Hi guys, what up, Viper here, and today I'm going to give you guys an in-depth guide about the consumables in the Illuvium Overworld and essentially what they fundamentally do. Well, everybody can read the text, but which Illuvials do they synergize well with? How can you utilize them to the maximum? Here we are with the 9 consumables that we currently have in the game. Now, the rare ring nut, there are obviously more than 9, there are different tiers of them, but let's just cover these. So ring nuts are restoring Illuvial integrity instantly on an Illuvial. In case you guys haven't noticed, if you are in an encounter, you press the I button that opens this menu, you press the Z button, you're gonna see your Illuvials and you're gonna see some kind of like health bar. If that is really, really low, you've seen these like warning signs, and if you use ring nuts on them, that goes away. Now, the really cool thing that I think many guys don't know, you can use those outside of combat. Like the scenario I just explained, right? You hit the I button, you hit the Z button, you see your Illuvials here, you see this bar. So currently they have the full integrity kind of thing. And if this goes really low, this blue line here, you can just drag ring nuts on them. And you see, I even used one here, right? It was 4140. Bam. So it even works in the overworld. I don't do this, I just like wasted 2 of them, but this is how you can do that outside of combat, so you're ready and you can win the next combat. Alright, let's talk about the other 8 next, because those are the in-combat ones, right? They actually give you additional stats. Now let's start with the tank-oriented ones, right? We have one that gives you healing, 5% of maximum health per second, and one that is 600 health and 60 physical and energy resistance. Now, there's like some math and some formula stuff and so on, right? Like how much effective HP does 5% per health give you? How much effective HP does 60 physical and energy resistance give you? Plus the initial max health bonus here. I feel like I've been using a lot more rare Flora Balls lately, because the only fights that seem really difficult to me are when the enemy team is super damage oriented, has a lot of Illuvials and a lot of encounter buffs that are just very on this high damage side and are not really high on utility or healing or defense or anything like that. Defensive things really easy to beat. So this is really, really good if the enemy team just has a lot of upfront damage. If it's a bunch of fighters, a bunch of rogues, and they have like 2+ damage modifier in the encounter mods, these are very, very good to have. Even if you don't have healing support in your team. Usually more resistance means more percentage damage mitigation. If you combine that with healing, that is the ideal combo. But a lot of these fights are over very, very quickly, because the enemy team is just damage oriented and they don't actually have like tanks, right? You just position and you focus down their damage dealers very easily, focus down the tanks last. So their Flora Ball is essentially exactly for that setting, that you have enough time for, first of all, your utility and healing and support of Illuvials to cast their abilities, period. And it just helps you to survive this initial damage burst of the enemy team. Synergizes very, very well with empaths and healing-based Illuvials. And then the rare basket fruit, this one is really good if you have Illuvials that have very high damage mitigation and the enemy team is relatively low on the damage output side. The enemy team is very defensive, a lot of empaths and bulwarks. They're not gonna just kill your tank very quickly, but the fight might go on very, very long. So if you have no healing and you use this, well, maybe your team takes too long to take down the enemy and eventually your tank is gonna die. Those are the fights where the rare basket fruit are better, because it just makes your tank very immortal versus especially empath and bulwark and low damage modifier enemy teams. So that's the story about these 2 ones. I think these are the 2 most frequently used ones. I think these are like probably the two best ones, because no matter what team you play, no matter what damage dealer, what win condition you play, you always have to have some sort of like tank, some sort of like front line. Or I guess you can play like a full rogue, full damage team and so on. I think that is harder to pull off. I think the easy thing to pull off is always playing like front to back, have your tank, have your damage dealer, maybe have some healers mixed in there. And then these are the super standard consumables for that. So I also recommend just picking them up in the overworld when you're doing your normal capture runs. Just shoot at them on the side if you see them. I don't think it is super optimal to make specific runs for mining or specific runs for consumables at the moment. I would always suggest to just shoot the consumables you use a lot when you're just passing by, because you probably don't need 4,000 energy for fighting. There's not enough on the map that is valuable enough to spend 4,000 energy on fighting. Okay, next we have, these are the two prime damage dealer ones, the rare Gumbo Drop and the rare Jellyfruit Tendrils. This one attack damage and attack speed, this one gives some mega power and energy regen. Now, I think the rare Jellyfruit Tendrils is not that good, honestly. I think 60 Omega Power and 6 energy regen is way worse compared to 80 attack damage and 60 attack speed. That's also, I mean, I in general think that the hyper of fighters and rogues, the auto attack based Illuvials, are way stronger than the Psion one, especially in combination with this. Because rogue and fighter, they get attack speed bonus, resistance piercing, and just like damage bonies, and they work really well together with attack damage and attack speed of this consumable. Now, Psions, for example, they get a lot of Omega Power of going hyper, so the Omega Power you get here is a lot less valuable. And 6 energy regen, honestly, that is not the craziest stat. 6 energy regen is far worse than a 60 attack speed bonus. Which makes me, in general, also believe that the overall team building meta, I don't know if you guys watched the recent video, talked about the teams that you can go for and that are very strong and viable, is more on this auto attack based Illuvia side. I think that Umbra, Scoriox, Phosphorus, pretty much all the fighter Illuvials, if they get hyper and they have this, which buffs attack damage and attack speed even further, they're gonna perform way better than any kind of Psion damage dealer or mega power based Illuvia is gonna perform with this. I think this is not really used as a damage dealing one, honestly. I would rather use this as a utility one for a lot of empath Illuvials. If we, for example, want to check here and let's look at only stage 1s, stage 1 empaths, right? So Ador has a pretty good Omega power scaling on the heal. Archie has a good Omega power scaling on the heal. App now has a slight Omega power scaling on the heal. And Omega power is very good on all of these. And bringing empaths, I think, is good. I think that makes this front to back fighting pretty easy. And that is just like the baseline. Yeah, I guess the baseline idea of combat in auto battles, just fight front to back. You have your tanks, you have your damage healers, the enemy side has their damage healers and tanks, you have your utility Illuvials, they have their utility Illuvials, and you just position better, outperform them, because that is what this PvE part is about. You can see the enemy position, you position into them, nice, you win. So this is better used as a utility buff on your utility providing Illuvials that benefit off of mega power. For example, your empath Illuvials like Adors and Archies. That's my take on this. If you want to play and level Psion Illuvials, my take on that is also that you should rather just have them as some filler Illuvials in your team, and you have a like really good tank, maybe 2 tanks, a really good damage dealer, maybe 2 damage dealers, and maybe 1 or 2 supportive Illuvials, and then you fill that out with the filler Illuvials, which probably the Psion Illuvials are gonna be. Now, talking about leveling Illuvials up, because that is oftentimes what we have to do to fuse them into higher stages, maybe for airdrop points, maybe because we want to make a team that we just want to play and not really min-maxing the leveling and the airdrop point stuff, just have fun playing the game. Flint caps are very good for that. There's not much to say here, it just gives you Illuvial more experience in the fight that you give it to, so a very efficient way of leveling Illuvials. Now, then we have 2 different other damage versions or forms, or I don't know how you want to call them. We have one that is Fawns, like the name suggests, if the enemy attacks an Illuvial, Fawns will deal damage to the attacker. This one deals 40 pure damage per attack. And then there's the Dragon Egg, and they deal pure damage per second to enemies in a medium area around them. Now, I think we've talked about, for example, empath Illuvials. If you have empath Illuvials in your team and you feel like, man, this is going to be a tough fight that's going to come up, and maybe I'm going to win, maybe I'm not going to win, giving especially the melee empath Illuvials those Dragon Eggs, I think is a good call. Because then it's just a damage buff that doesn't really have to scale. Like they don't need to have damage dealing abilities or high attack speed or traits or anything like that. It's just they're going to follow your team around because they're empaths. If they go hyper, they have a lot of healing. So yeah, they're gonna heal, they're gonna survive, but they're also able to take down enemies. I think the empath slot is essentially the best to give these to. Outside of that, you can also maybe you have, I don't know, like a random small cheap fighter Illuvial that's just a filler for your team. Certainly always easy to just put these onto those Illuvials, onto those mini Illuvials that are not really by themselves gonna accomplish a whole lot of damage, or that you wanna buff with utility or anything like that. I mean, that's the main use case for these. It helps a lot if you feel like the fight is going to be really tough to just have this additional little bit of a damage, or maybe even just due to how the fight goes or positioning or anything like that, your main damage guy might even die. But then you still have this as a source of damage while you have utility and tanks and healing and so on still alive. So very, very useful in that case. Now, this one is a bit more interesting because, like I've said before, usually you want to give your tanks some survivability so that they survive and they don't get killed quickly and you just, I don't know, get run over in these fights. I think if you want to go for the Fawns option, you don't want to play, like my current team, for example, is using a bunch of low stage Illuvials that I want to farm experience points on. Now, this Scarabok is already level 38, so that one has gone a long way, and I could have I could have fused this into a Goliath. I could have almost fused this into a Titanor already, and it does have enough experience points for that. I still want to play the Scarabok because it only costs 50 mastery points, so I have more shards to throw at the enemy. But that Scarabok is also just a tank that I have to buff in survivability because of exactly that reason. It is only a 50 cost stage 1 Illuvial. If I would make this into a Titanor, I could give the Titanor, for example, the Thorns buff, and then instead of playing the Phosphorus as my win condition, as my damage dealer, I could very well use that Titanor as a tank with Thorns, or maybe a Seer, these high tier, high stage tanks that have a lot of damage reduction, combine them with Empath Illuvials like Ador that heal them up against the enemy team, and then that is your damage win condition. I think that is more a fancy niche option. It can be cool, it can be really, really fun to go for that, but because you want to have this high level tank and the fights are going to take really long, I don't think it's very optimal, but it certainly just is an option that you can go for if you want to play that playstyle, if you enjoy that playstyle. I think this 40 Fawns number could be buffed a little bit. 40 Fawns is very strong, but looking at a lot of the overworld encounters and counter mods that they have and such, it is probably on the weaker side of these consumables for sure. Like this could maybe even be like, I don't know, 80 Fawns, and I think it would still be okay. Maybe I'm overreaching here. I've never seen 80 Fawns, obviously. And then the last consumable on the list is the rare spike juice. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen, I have a couple of shorts and clips, especially on X, that I shared about rare spike juice on something like Phosphorus, right? I think I've talked in previous video about how you can make a, especially melee damage dealer, become a, so to say, drain tank. Because in this game, if Illuvials take damage, then they gain energy, and if they have their energy maxed out, they use their Omega ability. If their Omega ability deals a lot of damage, you can, okay, you take 1000 damage, you use your Omega ability, deal damage, bam, heal 1000 health. Well, maybe a bit of exaggerated number to the heal 1000 health, you have to do almost 4000 damage, but honestly, that is very well possible with some Omega abilities of some Illuvials. So this can be really, really strong on something like a Phosphorus, make it a drain tank that's gonna just, yeah, you're gonna keep surviving forever, or on like anything that is really in this like fighter and or rogue category. So these, or preferably the higher stage versions of them, right? Like a Riplens, if a Riplens goes hyper, maybe Riplens is kind of like a worse option though, because it has a single target Omega ability. So something like Rota or Rota's higher stages, better options because they have an AoE ability, and that AoE ability is probably going to hit a lot of enemies. They're going to heal to full, and then they can take damage again. If they can survive until they can cast another ability, they're just going to repeat the cycle of take damage, cast ability, heal to full, take damage, cast ability, heal to full. Same can go for Ramfies, Ramfights, Ramfires, and all these that have AoE abilities especially. So yeah, foe into Phosphorus, right? Prime example. This can also be true for a couple of the Bulwark Illuvials, to be honest, because some of the Bulwark Illuvials have really high damage dealing abilities. So for example, Flare, Cinch, and Seer, very high damage dealing ability if it's surrounded by a lot of enemies. Spike Juice can be really, really strong here. And then Illuvials like Cling Carab, like they have utility abilities. On those, it's not that good. But if we, for example, have a Lynx, right? The Stoic Lynxes, very strong with the Spike Juice thing as well, because you read their abilities, they do 550 damage times Omega power. So if they have higher levels or they have good stats like these, they're going to have more than 100 Omega power. They're going to do a lot of AoE damage around them. Very, very good with that Spike Juice thing as well. So yeah, either you have melee damage dealers, rogues or fighters most of the time with AoE damage dealing abilities. They take a bunch of damage, they usually survive because levels and resistance buffs and so on, they just give them enough leeway that they can at least cast their Omega ability once, preferably more than once, cast, heal to full, and repeat, and maybe that one Illuvial can take down an entire enemy team. Especially this is kind of true for things like maybe Umbras, Rampfires, Gyros, Phosphorus, even for things like Theodore, because it really does that much damage with that spin, and it has a damage reduction built in and so on and so on. So it works really, really well on those damage dealing Illuvials. All right, so I think here we are. I hope this was a pretty good in-depth guide on those consumables. And maybe if you guys had some issues with some fights in the overworld, I really tried to make more and more videos covering all of these small things, from team building to consumables to maybe I'm going to talk about encounter mods next. Maybe I'm going to make more videos about positioning. I do have a lot of videos about positioning in the past. Certainly scroll down and check those out if you feel uncomfortable with if you feel uncomfortable with your positioning in the overworld. Go and check out those old videos. I can certainly make a new one if you guys want me to do that. Outside of that, let me know what you guys want to see in upcoming videos. I have a lot of things planned, but I always appreciate more ideas because I always want to make more videos, and really how many ideas I have is kind of capping me on that. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. If you're new to Illuvium, go sign up, go play the game. It genuinely, even in the testnet phase right now, feels like a fun Web 2 game to play. It's really, really cool. Use my ref link down in the description. I appreciate that, and see you guys.